When you're a young guy, my fear was standing in front of a group and really blotching something. As a 67-year-old, my fear of standing in front of a group and dying. How horrible would that be? Joe Graham's magazine would light up. A single page would go crazy. Guy dies in front of audience. So it does cross your mind when you got chest pains and whatever standing here. Geez, oh, Pete, I just want to go to my mail. We use without the stupid internet. All right. Where are you? The water guy. Here you are. Late breaking news, and it makes perfect sense. The bees aren't collecting water. The water is a solvent for something the bees really want. And how cool would that be? Because they're flying over my mildly dirty water with leaves and their dead comrades in it, to go over to the water that has the distraught goldfish and frog in the murky water that it's drinking. So I would agree with that, very much so. That is a possibility, because I've seen bees, oddly, I put it in the magazine, foraging on compost leaves. And me trying to figure out, why would the bees be back on composting leaves? And I stood there and made pictures of bees buzzing. It wasn't 1 or 2 or 5, it was 300. And then I got this message: if you wrote it, I'm not being unkind. Looks like you'll be getting rid of your nice kid's pool and building a tub-type small landscape pond that you'll fill with murky water and place it 50 feet from your hive. Can anybody add to that? Is this like a good thing, or is this like you are one dumb guy? So thank you for writing, all of you who do. I can't tell you how that goes. Sir, I was not making light. Good suggestion. And he gave credit to Randy Oliver because he wants us to think. And I should be able to think of some ditty right now. I guess the one that comes to mind is a scientist who cut off a frog's leg and then reported he cut off a frog's leg, and he really couldn't hop nearly as well. So he took it to the next level, got more funding, cut off another leg, and the frog really had trouble hopping. And you know the story. 2 and 4, finally the 4th leg's cut off, tested the frog, jump, do something. The frog didn't move at all. So the obvious conjecture and the results were, if you cut off all 4 of a frog's leg and tell him to jump, he goes deaf. So that's this scientific thinking thing, where you have to look at what things may be or not. I will add that concept to any future comments that I have later on. You know, all that separates you from going home is me talking for the next 3 hours. Did we mention the exam? A short answer. You'll have about 30 minutes for that. Still terrifies me. I never hear it anymore. Take everything off your desk and get out 1 sheet of paper. God, not today. This is the last time we kept bees their way. Is the Ohio State apiarist here today? I'm sorely tempted, without her being involved in it, since we have a law, of just seeing what it's like to put bees back in 3 or 4 or 5 of these things, not science and not saying we digress, but just to see if a more natural nest still succumbs at the same rate, same time, same way as the nest that we artificially manage. But this is where we were, and this bad line art drawing is all that I can find of where we eagerly took all of these things out and transferred them over to new boxes. The USDA put out 2 or 3 brochures telling you how to make that transfer happen. And the odd thing is how good, how great we felt about ourselves. Yep, they must love me. I took those bees out of trash and deject accommodations, and I moved them into a nice white artificial domicile with the front porch located close to good schools. They must absolutely just love us. And when you walk away from the hive, if you could ask the bees, they hate you. You are their #1 predator. You are the biggest issue they have to deal with. So we went through this phase. I did it. I personally, in Dothan, in the swamp, was part and parcel to my brother and I waiting. You could only work the bees when the water was down, because the guy just went to any tree you could find and nailed a board to it and the next tree, and then built these nailed stands between trees. When the water's up, you can't go back there, snaky and wet, and had all these box hives there. And we hauled them out. It was 35 or 40 of them, coming apart, disassembled, oddly made, none the same, and hauled them to Auburn and spent a week transferring those things to new modern equipment. To my knowledge, not a single picture was taken, and that's the last time I know of any box hives in what was, a long time ago, my hometown. It's just 4 boards. They're usually about 38 inches long. There's an X cross. You shouldn't build these things. Don't go home and build these things, because I'm playing with you here. This is not a good idea for all of us to get involved in this. Let the crazies get involved in it. That would be me. I'm a non-traditional beekeeper. The big insurance companies already decided it. So this is the way that bees could manage their own affairs in a box that we gave them. Langstroth. And it kind of makes me kind of chill. I don't think it was in this room. This room was some kind of a saw room contraption. This wall wasn't here. None of that was here. And this was a much bigger room, and it sat lower. And there were huge ceiling. I wonder if the ceiling here above this must be, I don't know, 8 or 9 feet higher than we see right here. And this is where that gigantic vacuums and blowers and systems were. And they made the frame top bars and end bars here. And they would also make ruler blanks for common wood rulers. And I came in this room, and there was a guy who worked here who I was told to come see, and that he could sell me clear maple lumber. So I came to the AI Root Company and bought clear maple lumber that they were going to use to make rulers out of. They had carloads of it. And I took it back to my home and built my daughter a real ugly desk out of it. But she still got it, and she cherishes that. So to tell you then that AI Root took this center piece of equipment, did away with all the ornate glass and whatever. All you can see is bee butts and elbows anyway, and just used the center part of it and then designed it so it could be supered. And he did that, I suspect, over here in the old building. Can you help me? I'm making this up as I go along, just based on where the cracks are on the wall, where you kept adding on. So this is sacred ground. So this has basically happened here between Langstroth and AI Root, taking Langstroth's hive and then changing it so it could be commercially manufactured and cranking that thing out here. So that basically was the death knell of anything in box hives, and all the other beehives that you never knew somebody tried. Go to the patent office when you've got about 5 years, you got nothing to do, and look at all the beehive designs that have come and gone. So what we're left with then is the insides of Langstroth's original colony. It's standardized, it's interchangeable, it's simple. You're all advanced beekeepers. You know it very well. But it's far from perfect. In the early days, here again, in this facility, they manufactured chaff, insulated hives. They were common around 1915. This was AI Root's catalog cover in 1922, showing the insulated beehive boxes that were there. So far as I can tell, by my modest collection of catalogs, they were gone at 1958. We had papers on cellaring and bee houses. When John mentioned having them in a cellar, I'm not sure what you meant. Was that actually underground?
At ground level.
So it wasn't really a cellar, it was indoor wintering.
Indoor wintering, correct.
Because I tried the cellar thing. They had a mental institute just outside of Worcester, and they abandoned it. So kind of an odd place to go when it wasn't abandoned. But they had a potato cellar there, and I was authorized to use these farm buildings they weren't using. So I put 35 or 40 beehives in that thing and said, what a nice place for you. You're going to be great here. Well, what happened that I've never seen or heard before is bodacious, uncontrolled mold grew like I've never seen before. It would icicle down. You think, is there something down here besides us? This is really weird. Well, the bees did this proper thing right away and died hammer dead. So that was my first and one of my last efforts at cellar wintering. Packing hives, as a real recommendation, was gone around 1950. Wrapping hives is still somewhat done. Prominent people, E.F. Phillips, would write whole books on insulating value of double-walled hives. And these things were intricately made. This was about 5/16 of an inch thick. Some of this stuff's in Ohio State's Beekeeping Museum, which is real difficult to get in, but at least the stuff survives. And it's about 5/16 of an inch thick, and it's got box joints on the edges, and it was filled with wood chaff and newspaper. And then I want to refer to this again in a bit. My friend here will know it when he sees it. This piece here, where they had the chaff covering, so you can see it was insulated. E.F. Phillips was the apiarist in charge of bee culture investigations for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It couldn't get any more official. They put a lot of energy in that. There's bee houses down the road in Smithville, Ohio, octagonal houses. Why wouldn't it have been a hexagonal house? But it seemed to be octagonal in one of the old ABCs. I have no idea where it was, H.H. Rice, because Seville was just 15 miles down the road to see if I could find H.H. where he had his bee house. I've been to houses in Ohio that have bee rooms on the top floor in the gables, and they'll just have boxes up there and put bees in that, and then you send a kid who had been unruly up to the attic room to bring down some fresh honey. So these living with our bees or living near our bees has not been that uncommon. I got so caught up in it because of my lovely neighbors. They're not bad people, 26 miles from here. Don't say anything to them. You know what a small world it is? You want to know how small the world is? My neighbor went to Columbus for some surgery, my neighbor, and was taken into surgery by a bee guy. I don't know how they figured it out, and that bee guy asked the neighbor if he's the one who gave me all the problems about water. So when I tell you I'm traumatized by water, you're going through your pockets, do I have a gun anywhere? Because if I got a gun, I'm going to shoot you first and then myself. That's a true story. No exaggeration. I bought a little outdoor barn. The Amish make it here in Ohio. They deliver the thing, drop it off. I bought the biggest one I could buy. I'm going to put beehives in the side. And what I put in there instead was a bunch of lumber I'm never going to use, some old bicycles my grandkids don't ride, a small tractor I use, and I filled it up. But one day, I'm going to put some beehives in that thing. Wintering bees in cellars, same guy, Phillips. There's modern versions of these cellars today. You got to control the heat at around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. CO2 always accumulates down near the bottom. Lady asked, you got to have fans to keep that stuff moved around. Who was talking about too many speakers? Somebody was talking about you got to be precise. You can't. Oh, you were 22,000 colonies. You said whole operation in one place. You got to be certain the fans don't quit and all that thing. You got to be certain that that air keeps moving and around. In the old days, mice drove them crazy. The mice think you built that building for them, and they love you for it. Wagons and trailers on good days, they'd pull the bees out. They must not have had a life otherwise. I think I'll go pull the bees out. Nothing else to do today. The question that I've never been able to answer, if there's somebody here who can help me, horse people, how did you convince that horse that everything was all right to pull that wagon loaded with nasty bees? I don't know. I'm serious. Why didn't the horse just go crazy when it was stung all over his ear, butt, tail, bees everywhere? And yet I can't find a single reference to what kind of horse had to be brain dead enough to pull a load of bees. So if you got something, anybody, let me know, because I'm not a horse guy. But just leave that there. What that has to do with wintering is absolutely nothing. But this was another great paper, serious paper, honest early science on how this should work. Iowa State University would pack bees, 4 single units. This is what it looked like when they were closed up, filled full of chaff. I mean, you could get in there with them, and I'm sure the mice got in there too. So this is a big packing operation that went on. We still do this today. You can buy these kind of things. You can still use them. This is just one of 1,000 web addresses that you can look up that says why this guy is stupid for doing that. So there's a strong polarization, a clear polarization between the packers and the non-packers. And the non-packers are adamant that that black paper keeps the cold in on the occasional day when the bees could fly. And the others argue that overall, the damage and the store's preservation is saved by having the colony packed. So my good friend from Alabama and his co-worker actually experimented with a paint that would change color from Germany, wasn't it? And would turn dark in the cold sunlight.
Turn black at 40 degrees and turn white at 86.
Turn black at 40 degrees and turn white at 86. So I'm not saying that because he's my friend from Alabama, but I'm saying it because it's going to take you folks to figure this stuff out, because there's no funding money for major universities to pursue this kind of thing. It didn't work well, but it didn't work horribly. The main thing is they were thinking and they found the product. Don't forget it, because that product will get better and possibly more useful. So wrapped colonies, you decide which camp you're in, or you can just stay confused. We went for a while putting our entrances on the side and called this the warm way entrance, because they thought then, you could think it now, that the air that would go in would be baffled before it would fly up and out. I did that, kind of fun to do it, not sure it was useful. This is me. No data, no science here. This is just me being 67 and tinkering with bees for a long time. It seems to me that wintering for bee colonies quietly died in the early 60s. I think probably it was due to USDA and university opinions changing about this whole wintering thing, how it would work, and we began to drift away from all of this concept we've been through of packing, cellaring, wintering, insulated hives, and we let it go. Beekeepers clearly begrudge the extra work, cost, having to store all this stuff, pay people to do it. Positive results were not clear every year. And replacement bees and queens were dirt cheap. I've honestly paid 75 cents for a new queen. 2.5 was just off the charts unreasonable. So even when bees were expensive by that standard, it was still cheap. One year my lab had 65 swarm calls. So that was back pre-mite days. Bees were everywhere. They were as common as flies. So if your bees died in the winter, just get some more. Bee swarms, I'll call around, I'll call the fire department. So there was this lack of impetus. Swarms were plentiful, there was no mites, no AHBs, scant nosema concern. We didn't know we should be concerned, and if we weren't sure what to do. Bees in a box became our way of thinking. And where it concerns me now is bees in a box are really being challenged by varroa, by nutritional issues, by pesticide and chemical issues that we weren't necessarily challenged with then. They are more dear to us, and it's almost like we're back in the 30s again with our bee herd and the care we should be giving them to keep the numbers where you want them. But that's just me. And I'm not prepared just to go to the mat with you to defend that, because this is about 85 to 90% conjectural. So from that point on, we have gone our own way. You, I understand, 95% of us are beekeeping enthusiasts. You don't move your hives around any more than you have to. You have a close, personal, working bee philosophy. You name all your bees. You go out at night and you're certain they've all gotten home safely. You don't crush bees when you put supers back on. I know you people. I know you. So you can really be impractical, but you're mindlessly creative. So that's a good thing about all this, because you're not really bound by financial considerations. You can really do dumb things, like come sit at a meeting for 2 straight days. So that really makes you devoted. You're like bluebird house people on steroids. So this is all a good thing. I'm serious. I love you for being here, every one of you. But this is who I think that you are. One of the enthusiasts has given me a prototype of his idea got shoulder issues, of a heated bottom board. He's an electrical engineer, and as I speak, this thing is sampling the air 300 times a second, and upon the appropriate range of temperatures, it will kick itself on from a minimum to a maximum, and he wanted me to bring it to Ohio and let it run to see what happens here. Now, whether or not it's successful, green light tells you that it's working. And the temperature probe was pushed back in there, but it's all there. So, don't come up, copy the guy's idea verbatim, but I'm glad he's working on it. I'm glad the people are doing the paint work. I'm glad you folks are looking. I don't mind you shooting at sacred bee cows. Don't kill them all, but go ahead and have a look at what it takes to make these things work better. You are creative. Some of these people are returning to an older procedure. This is moisture absorbing, could double as smoker fuel. We've discussed that, may not happen. Doubles as a moving screen potentially, plus it's economical to do. My friend Bob has been using this. Bob, you got 2 minutes because I'm out of time. It's almost 4. This is your moment. Go. You want this?
On top of all my bees,
Hand him that.
we just basically take the top cover and we cut a hole. It's about 6 inches wide, 4 inches wide. Put screen on top of it, then fill it in with cedar chips. We raise the lid by maybe 2 inches, and then we, somebody might not like this one. We put a green mouse pellet into the chips. The bees cannot get into that at all. But if the mice do, that stops that. When the bees have all the moisture coming up in the wintertime, and we've had some really cold winters, all the wood chips absorb it. I've looked at it where the chips are completely crystallized and the hive is completely dry. I haven't had one hive die out from winter drop, as far as that comes at all.
I love it. So that's that thing I was talking about, my friend in the red shirt. I can't get ahead of you guys. Found this on the web. He's already done it. So I will put it on my list of things I should do, but probably won't. Winter feeding, I'm out of time. Take an empty deep, empty super, empty anything, lay it on top of a sheet of newspaper on your hungry bees, lightly atomize the newspaper, pour granulated sugar on it, cut a knife hole through that sugar. I pack newspaper in the rest of it. That hungry cluster will move up through those slits in newspaper and will eat that sugar using what I assume is metabolic water, and we're not going to get in the water subject again. So this is a way to feed bees granulated sugar during the winter. I don't know who devised it. I got it from a beekeeper in Ohio. If bees rob when the period of dearth, will bees rob during the winter and we're just not watching it? I don't know. Robbing in the winter would be a classic time to rob. Nothing else is in bloom. Strong hives are strong, weak hives are weak, and I have no idea if robbing occurs in the winter. It'd be called progressive robbing. So there's that. Go into winter with a healthy colony. We know now from 2 days the confusion and the ambiguity of that, but that's one of my pillars. It may be confusing and ambiguous, but you got to do it. Are they going to die in March? Whatever. Take your losses in the fall, clean it up, get on with it, or do it right. Feed the colony before it needs it. That stuff I was showing you was for stimulative feed, not for storage. Position the food stores properly. They're going to move up or to the side, rarely back down. Protect the colony from the weather. You decide. Fences, bales of hay, indoor wintering, whatever. Protect it from the weather. Provide for upper ventilation because we've got this box that holds too much moisture. If you don't get some of it out, you're going to drown them. And it'd be far more than they need for brood. Reduce the lower entrance, and you can see where that high cluster has burned through the snow on the roof lid there, so you know that one's up tall. If you want this, get it off my webpage. This is Canadian work. But in general, forget I even showed it. commercial beekeeping in 1 minute and a half because you guys have just ripped me up. You do such a great job discussing it. It's a mixed bee management philosophy in general. They pick and choose, in my estimation, the parts that work for them. They design their own parts and pieces. So much of what I see commercial beekeepers do has so little to do with beekeeping. When Andy was describing the layout, I mean, that's plumbing, that's electrical fittings, that's wall coverings, that's floor coverings. So much of it isn't beekeeping, but it takes that. How are you going to run these trucks? Where do you get fuel for these things? How do you leave a fuel dump without having these people come chase you down and want to murder you? I don't know the answers to any of these things. I had a colorful story from my friend from Chipley, should he still be here, about the one time that I hauled bees to Florida. You get lost at night, and yes, it's true, you can drive right into a pond. And you look real stupid when the sun comes up. They have to develop their own procedures. There is no standard commercial beekeeping that I know of. It's all usually unique and highly individualized. The medium-sized colonies, for the most part, I was surprised when Steve. When Steve was showing those colonies off the charts. I thought those guys were always 2 deeps and 2 supers, and you came and got the supers all along and all that kind of thing, but here you go to the ceiling. See, I just said you're individualized. Total standardization, so you can walk on the truck, highly mechanized, but more and more you hobbyists are becoming mechanized. I wanted to show you a picture here. I believe that's John Miller up there. Is that John? Is that you, John? Yeah, that's before he got vertigo. Moving to the warm climate. I don't know why. I'm out of time. Why is the South so great? What is it? Is it only transportation cost? Is it only the headache of hauling bees through Cincinnati and Louisville that makes it not worth hauling bees to the South? Because it seems like, once you get there, that the bees lie in the sun along with you. I don't know. Easier winter feeding, easier pest control, earlier spring blossoms, queen inspections anytime you want, too much foraging when there's nothing available, pest populations have been known to flourish when they wouldn't otherwise, increased robbing activity potential, the effects of a long truck ride may affect the development of some of the brood food glands, and the absolute blind cost of travel. Looks like that great picture that I ripped from the internet. Indoor wintering has been thoroughly discussed, far better than I can. It's an individual procedure. If you think you're going to do this, talk to somebody besides me, because this is a complex procedure and you can kill bees instead of just wintering with them. You can winter nukes. That's really growing in popularity and interest. Got Peggy Garns right here, who's a winter nuke specialist. Stand up, wave your hand or something. Take all your winter nuke questions to her. And you can put them indoors if you're interested in that. A way of running in double nukes for the small people, modify bottom board this way, and then this nuke sits here with this entrance opening here. This nuke sits here with that entrance opening there. You keep them throughout the year. The Amish say that the cluster stays on the wall where it's warmest, and they supply heat to each other. So winter your own nukes or do that during the year. And I got a real... What? I got a patent on this. If you want a picture, it's going to be $4.95, but I certainly willing to negotiate with you. Everybody get their picture? It is a creative way to run that thing. I was going to say I had a very dramatic, poetic, bees in the snowstorms, bees withstanding it, to drive home the point that really bees have no business at this point wintering where it's really cold. And it's not really cold here compared to up Michigan, UP, and then all into Canada, up farther north. So they too are learning. Your wintering scheme needs to be what you've already known. Healthy bees, plenty of food, protected location, just do the basics. And bees are going to die. So try as you can to keep so many of them from dying. But the issue is food and varroa mite control. And that's all I know about anything. Thank you for letting me talk to you.